So now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Nancy Keeling, the president of the Princeton Area Community Foundation. The great Paul Ilvisacker once characterized foundations as today's passing gear. And by that he meant that foundations are uniquely suited to propel our communities out of their inertia, their static condition, and instead towards enduring long-term change for the better. Because they can be strategic and take risks and be flexible, foundations have the capacity to play a vital role in building communities and transforming lives. That's the purpose of the Princeton Area Community Foundation, to enable individuals, families, businesses, and organizations to create permanent charitable trusts and funds that help their communities to meet the challenges of changing times. The Community Foundation seeks to build community through philanthropy. Now, Nancy was appointed 20 years ago to be the Community Foundation's first president. Everyone who knows Nancy would agree that in assuming that role as president, Nancy had truly found her calling. Nancy is a gift for building connections, and the Community Foundation is widely seen as being deeply connected with people, organizations, and neighborhoods throughout our region. Nancy has a gift for promoting philanthropy, and the Community Foundation has increased its annual grants from just $11,000 when she came in as president in 1994 to nearly $8 million last year, with over $52 million being distributed over its 20 years, with Nancy at the helm. Nancy has a gift for building endowments for the future, and under her leadership, the Community Foundation has built its assets from $300,000 in 1994 to, as I understand it, almost $100 million now. And while she's done that, Nancy has built the Community Foundation from a tiny embryonic organization working with donated computers and donated desks into a lasting institution that will long serve our region and respond to its needs and challenges, whatever they may be in the future. And that capacity is priceless. Nancy's a former board chair of the Council of the New Jersey Grantmakers and a current board member of your chamber. And in 2011, she was honored by the chamber as the Community Leader of the Year. Earlier this year, Nancy announced that after leading the Community Foundation for 20 years, its first 20 years, she will be retiring from that position at the end of December and embarking on a new phase of her life. It's a great privilege for us to have Nancy speak with us today. Please give a warm welcome to Nancy Keeling.
I think I could just go home. He said it all, and he said it better than I could ever tell you. So the first question I would pose to you is, what is the Community Foundation, and why would you care? Because my guess is that there are a number of you here who've probably never heard of the Community Foundation and don't know what it does or how it might intersect with your life. So the Community Foundation is this region's sort of network center for philanthropy. Philanthropy being defined in the dictionary, if you were to go there, as care for other humans. We tend to think of philanthropy as the place that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller before them occupied, not some place that the rest of us live, and that's actually not right according to the dictionary. So every time you take a casserole next door because your neighbor is ill, you're a philanthropist. And we want the community to really know that, embrace that. We happen to work in the world of dollar philanthropy, but we recognize that time and talent philanthropy is equally important, and it drives our culture. So our work is to encourage and generate generosity across this region, the kind that makes this a great place to live and work. Sometimes when I'm at a chamber lunch table and someone asks me, what is the Community Foundation, what does it do? I simplify it and I say, we help generous people give money away and have fun doing it. They seem to get that. In fact, we've built an infrastructure that makes it simple. So yes, over time we have built assets now, actually I checked before I came, are closer to 105 million. We've raised about $136 million over the last 23 years. We've granted out 57. We've spent about 10 to keep the lights on and help us do the work to provide services to this broader community. And the rest of it was good investment management, because if you run those numbers, they don't add up. That $136 million has come to us from 8,800 people in 20,706 individual gifts. So there's lots of people who make this thing go. It's not me. I'm the figurehead. I'm the lucky person who gets to stand here, but this goes way beyond any one person. So as John said, our resources are brought to us by a wide variety of individuals, families, businesses, other foundations, other community foundations around the country. We are fond of saying that we are building for the future. We're not borrowing against it. This culture has been through times where it borrowed too much against the future. We're not doing that. We're doing that because we can't know what's in store 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, but we do know that there will be needs that we can't anticipate, and as a community, we want to provide for that. If you look around the country at other community foundations, ones that have been around for a very long time, they have that, and we're trying to catch up. So we're the region's savings account, we're the region's partner, we're the nonprofit sector's advocate and ally. This organization belongs to all of us, whether you know that or not. You know, sometimes I'm in the grocery store and I'm picking out tomatoes and I think, you know, the person next to me has no idea that there's a community foundation here, that they may even get services from one of our grantees and they have no idea, and isn't that a shame? So thanks for coming to lunch so I can tell you all about this. So how did this get going? I see this organization as entrepreneurial, and it started as all good entrepreneurial organizations do, with a good idea. In fact, I would say in this case, it was a brilliant idea, and it wasn't even ours. So the brilliance of the idea started in the city of Cleveland, Ohio, literally 100 years ago. The Community Foundation Field is celebrating its centennial this year. The Cleveland Foundation is 100 years old and has over $2 billion in assets. There are probably 25 other community foundations in the state of Ohio, and several of them are at or beyond $1 billion each. New Jersey is way behind the curve. So the Cleveland Foundation was birthed by a very smart, very shrewd businessman from his business and from his legal practice, because he was also a lawyer. His name was Frederick Goff. He was a trust banker. And he saw one day, looking through his book of business, that his trust accounts were costing him money. They were unprofitable business because on top of investing those assets, he had to be a grant maker, and it's costly work. So some light bulb went off in his head. I think the man was brilliant. And he said, if I move these trusts over to this nonprofit that I'll call the Cleveland Foundation, I can remain the banker. I can keep them on my books because I'm now investing them, but I can offload the costly work. He was also motivated by the fact that he had worked for John Rockefeller when Rockefeller set up his foundation. And he said to himself, you know, normal people ought to be able to do this as well, because the private foundation model doesn't work well for most of us who don't have 5 or 10 million to start with. So he had a real heart for his peers, for his community, and he went to the courts, had the ownership transferred to the Cleveland Foundation, and the rest, as we say, is history. But I always think it was just a brilliant stroke. The brilliance of it was affirmed by the fact that most of America's major cities adopted and built community foundations over the following 20 years. New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, and others have followed. There's been a huge explosion. In the 20 years that I've been at our community foundation, the field has doubled. When I came here in 1994, the field said there were roughly 350 of us. There are now 700. In terms of assets, this community foundation sits about in the middle, right about at the median. But the largest community foundation in the country is now the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I'm sure you're not surprised by that. And they have $4.7 billion. Those assets expanded enormously last year when Mark Zuckerberg made his $2 billion gift, and it went to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. His $100 million gift to Newark went to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. All community foundations are conduits, they're hubs, they're places that smart people go to get good advice about their philanthropy, and Mark Zuckerberg is a smart guy. The Silicon Valley Community Foundation, you ought also to know, is run by a Princeton graduate, of course. So the strength of the field really is that community foundations are embedded in their communities. They're staffed by people who live here. They do all of their work, or most of their work, locally, and they come to have a very deep knowledge of connection to local communities. There aren't many people in the nonprofit sector that, between Michelle and myself, we don't know. And we also know a lot of people on the other side of that equation, and those folks are called the donors, both to the Community Foundation and to lots of other local organizations. So it's been a great adventure. The original board of this organization decided that it was going to build something out of people's ties to the region and their generous impulses, because they built something, in a sense, otherwise out of nothing. They took 3 years to plan. They talked to other community foundations. It just took some time for them to figure out, do we want to do this? Can we do this? How would we do this? So they imagined something that hadn't been here before. An organization that belongs to everyone, where generous people could go to get expert support and hear creative ideas that could help them amplify their giving. There's a story on our website we put up recently about several of our donors who came together and funded air conditioners for the grant school in Trenton because kids were going to spend the summer there and they couldn't do that in an un-air-conditioned place. And the nonprofit that was working this program came to us and said, is there any way you can help us? And we went out to people and they got that done. There's a great picture there too. Kids, cool kids. So they created it, and I think that took courage. I think it took creativity. One thing they did right at the beginning and have done ever since is to put the right people on the bus. They're smart people. They have deep ties to the region. They've done very interesting professional work, and most of them have also sat on other boards and know the nonprofit sector here well. They put their own resources into this, and they're not afraid to ask others to do likewise. One of our original founders was a man named Stan Smoyer, who had been Assistant General Counsel at Johnson & Johnson, a huge philanthropist and civic activist in Princeton, a wonderful man, originally from Akron, Ohio, the birthplace of this kind of philanthropy, who had been asked twice before if he was interested in starting a community foundation, said no. Fortunately for all of us, he finally said yes. He used to say to me, Stan, by the way, was one of our biggest champions, and he lived to be 98 years old, and he was generous to the end. I would go on calls to people with him, and he would say to them, you should give to the Community Foundation, and you should give it completely unrestricted because it's good for the community, period. That was the end of his pitch. But then he did it, and he got others to follow him. After the Community Foundation had been in business for 3 years, they decided they needed full-time executive director help, and I was the lucky person who got hired. So it was just fun from the beginning. We just had to figure out what we were going to do. I often joke with the board that it was a little bit of the blind leading the blind. Over time, the staff has grown to be now, including myself, 8 full-time, wonderful, talented, accomplished people. We enjoy the support of a board of 20, a number of really talented volunteers, and all of you. So we found opportunities. We looked for some knocked on our door. We began to say yes to things that we would never say yes to anymore. We have since learned how to say no, which of course is another key piece of business, right? You can't be all things to all people. We still struggle with that one a little bit, but certainly in our grant making, as many of you in the room know, we say no. Some years, yes, other years, sometimes no for a long time, sometimes yes for a long time. It's, I don't know that we could even define exactly how that all happens.